Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Escondido in California. How has your day been? I have had a really good day today. As most of you know, yesterday was the second anniversary of my husband's passing, and I honoured his memory by doing a Lord of the Rings trilogy, like watching all three movies, all the extended versions. And I have to say, the last movie was 4.5 hours long, and it was like 30 minutes of credits. So the last credit rolled at 11:35 p.m. last night. So it was a long day, but I did take breaks while watching the movies and stuff, bathroom breaks. I did have to worry about food break at one point because I actually had to go to the grocery store and get some groceries because I'd forgotten to do it the day before. But it's great being in my little RV here because I can leave the TV at the same volume. I can get food ready. I can sit at the table and eat it while watching and everything else. The only time I need to pause it is when I have to go to the bathroom. But apart from that, it's great. You can get up, move around and all that, do some stretches, all that sort of stuff. So you're not just sitting for 3.5 to 4 hours or 4.5 hours, depending on which movie. But yesterday I figured out I hadn't seen those movies in over 2 years, because the last time I saw those movies, I'd been watching them with Brad, and we used to do theme nights. So we might sit and watch the Lord of the Rings movies on different nights. So, movie number one first night, second night movie, second and third night, that sort of thing. And that's how we did Star Wars episodes 1 through 6, was over 6 nights. And so we wouldn't sit and do binges during the day, although there was a couple of times we did do that, but not with any of those ones. We'd do like a Back to the Future binge day or something like that, or a James Bond day, and we'd pick 3 movies to watch and that sort of thing. But what was interesting was that in all the years I have been watching these movies with Brad, I have not really got as emotional as I did last night. So for those of you who have not seen Return of the King, the very last one, I'm sorry, this is going to be a spoiler for you, so turn off right now if you have intentions of watching it. But for those of you who have seen it, there's one of the scenes there towards the end is when they're down at the waterfront, and Bilbo Baggins has been put on the elf's ship that's going to the Undying Lands, and Gandalf is walking over that way as well after saying goodbye to the 4 hobbits. And then as Gandalf gets to the gangplank, he turns around and says to Frodo, "Are you ready?" And everybody looks at Frodo, sort of like, why? What's going on? What's happening? And then he does all of his goodbyes and that. And last night I got really emotional with that. And I'm going to do it again too, because they watch the ship just quietly sail off to the elves' Undying Land. And I thought, that's basically what Brad did, is that it took us by surprise. Well, yes and no. I thought he was going to last a lot longer than he did once he got home. But he just quietly slipped away in the middle of the night. In the early hours of the morning, he just quietly slipped away, like that ship just quietly slipped down over the horizon and everything else. And so I got quite emotional with that last night. And it kind of struck me with that similarity. And then when I was talking with my one of my mentors today from my accountability call that I do, it suddenly hit me that there was a lot of similarities between what I went through as a caregiver for Brad and what Brad went through being somebody who was dealing with cancer. So I kind of likened that he was Frodo. His burden that he had to carry was the ring to destroy it, and the burden that Brad had was cancer. I was Sam. I was his backup person. I was his support person there the whole way. His caregiver, his best friend, the person who looked after him, his advocate, that sort of stuff. So it was kind of interesting seeing some of the parallels through some of the challenges that they went through. And I sort of thought, there's some scenes there where Brad would get infections, would be like him getting stabbed with the spider thing and being comatose and all that sort of stuff, where Brad wasn't quite comatose. He did get... And then there was one thing that really stuck out with me is in one of the scenes there towards the end, as they're in Mordor, wherever they are to get the ring into the volcano thing, Mordor. Sam's laying there and he turns around and says, "I can't do this anymore." He says, "I just can't do this." And he's like, no energy left, completely out of it. He's spent, he's done. And I kind of look back on that and think, yeah, Brad was that way at one point too. Because not long after he was admitted to hospital for where he ended up being for 87 days, he actually got a sepsis infection, which is a really bad blood infection. And I almost lost him at that point. And he said to me at one point, and there's nurses in the room fussing around over him and all that. We had the ICU nurse was in there at the time, so I was waiting to transfer him to to another room. And he looks at me and he says, I can't do this anymore. He says, I just don't have the strength. And I thought back to that when Sam turns around and says, I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. And he picks up Frodo and starts climbing up the mountain to go into the volcano to drop the ring in. And I thought that's kind of what I did with Brad, is that I became his cheerleader. And I was thinking, he doesn't have the mental capacity right now to deal with this. I'm going to deal with it for him. And so I was like, one of the things I said to him, I says, don't you give up on me. And I said, and don't you make me call your boys. I said, don't make me do those phone calls. I do not want to do those phone calls. Do not make me do those phone calls. And I think that might have been what helped him really a little bit. But during those struggles and times like that when Brad was ready to give up, I was there as his cheerleader to help carry him through over that hump so we could then move on to the next thing. And so I just thought about, some of the challenges that they faced along the way were kind of similar. We're constantly going uphill, and we would get through one challenge and be like, we're through that, okay, let's keep going. And then we face another challenge, and then another challenge, and it was like one challenge after another, after another, after another. So that was what I learnt last night was while watching the movies. I'm just going through my little notes that I wrote here. It's just some of the similarities between Sam's relationship with Frodo, about how, Sam was always there. He was the support person, he protected him, he was always looking out for him, being the advocate, and that sort of thing, being his best friend. I had the extra thing there of being the wife. So, that was what I figured out. That's what kind of dawned on me today as I, especially when I was talking with my mentor about that last scene where Frodo's slipping off into the distance, just quietly sailing away, is basically what Brad did. He just slipped quietly away. And then when I was talking with her, I went, oh my gosh, he was Frodo. He was carrying the burden of the ring, which was the cancer. And unfortunately, when we put it in the fire the first time, it came back. It was just interesting coming up with how things just clicked, and there was some similarities in there. So that was my aha moment from watching Lord of the Rings trilogy. I don't know if I will ever do it again in one day, because I think I put the first movie on at like 9 o'clock in the morning, and the last credit rolled on the last movie at 11:35 p.m. And I know that because whenever the credits started rolling, I would come sit down here at the table, pull out my journal, and I would write a letter to Brad after seeing each movie. And just things like letting him know what's happened in the past year, where I'm at, what's happening, how I'm feeling, what movie I just watched, what I thought of it this time, because it was the first time I've seen the movies without him. And so I was sitting here writing down the last letter, and I said, okay, the last credits just rolled, and I looked up at the clock on the microwave over there, and it said 11:35, and I said, it's now 11:35, the last credit has just rolled. And I started this process at 9 o'clock this morning. So actually, I didn't do too bad, given the day. I didn't do too bad. So that was, 14 and a half hours? Oh my gosh. But then there was also toilet breaks in there, and there was going and getting the groceries. And I'd take a break between the movies and step outside, get some fresh air, take some deep breaths, walk around a little bit, come back inside, get ready for the next movie. So it wasn't like sitting and watching one movie back to back to back to back. I did have probably about a 20 to 30 minute break between each movies. Well, plus the credits, because I was sitting right to Brad while the credits were rolling. And then when the last credit rolled, then I would get up and do some stuff and then get ready for the next movie and sit back down. So if you take the credits into account, because that's the full length of the movie, then between when the last credit rolled and the first credit rolled on the next movie was probably 20 to 30 minutes between each one. So that wasn't too bad. 14 and a half hours though. It was a long day. I don't know if I will ever do that again. I don't know. But we'll see. But anyway, do you have any movies that you have watched? So here's my question for you. Do you have any movies that you have watched where you can relate to what some of the characters are going through because it's something that you yourself have been through? Think about that one. Can you relate to character? Do you have favorite movies where you can relate an incident that happens or a challenge that happens, or You know, like yesterday where I had, you know, Sam was that support person for Frodo while Frodo was carrying that burden of the ring, and I liken the ring to being the cancer. So do you have any movies that are like that you like to watch because it sort of gives you those aha moments about life? That's my question for you for today. You don't have to put them in the comments. You can private message me, because I know some people will have some private ones that they really don't want to put. So just private message me your answers, because I'm curious to know if there's other movies out there that you've had aha moments about a parallel between the movie and life. So, and Sharon put almost always, but nothing that comes really to mind. Something will come to mind that really sticks out for you when you think about it. You put it in the subconscious there, it'll tick away there. 2 o'clock in the morning, you're going to have an aha moment. Oh yes, that movie when this happened, yes. You know, those 2 a.m., yeah, we call them the 2 a.m. conversations. But anyway, hope you have a super fantastic... Oh, that was the other thing I did today, is I finally got down to the cemetery and visited Brad's grave, so I was able to get that done today too, because I didn't do it yesterday, so I made an effort to get down there today. And as usual, the second I see that headstone, I'm gone. So just had a few quiet moments with him, but I don't know what it is about cemeteries, but I love cemeteries. I love them. The genealogist in me absolutely loves them. But for personal, I just love them. They are so peaceful, so calm, so quiet. Usually, mainly. But even as a kid, during my teenage years, we lived in Waitara, and over our back fence was the local cemetery. And I used to go up over the fence through there onto the Elliott's grave, which had been there since the 1800s, and I used to apologise to them every time I stepped on their grave. And then I'd just go wandering around the cemetery and just reading some of the tombstones and the headstones and that sort of thing, and seeing how old people were when they passed, and seeing what new ones had been added in there, because we'd always know if there was a funeral over there, because we could see the parking lot for the cemetery from our back porch, and so we'd know when somebody had been buried. And so, you know, you go over there every now and again to see what new tombstones have gone in and that sort of stuff. And I remember one time my aunt and my cousin were visiting, and my youngest brother and my cousin, they're only like about 3 or 4 months apart in age, and they were like thick as thieves when they were younger, thick as thieves. And one time they were over in the cemetery. It wasn't long after we'd moved into the house, and they came running back one day, and they're sort of like, you know, can we go back to the cemetery? And they're like, why? And they said, well, we want to see them put the man in the bucket down the hole. And they're like, what are you talking about? And apparently they had been digging a grave for an upcoming funeral, and these 2 kids who were, hang on, how old were we moved there? 13, probably about 7 or 8, maybe 6. Might have been 6. No, yeah, it would have been 6. They would have been 6. Went over there, they saw this thing all boarded up and all that, and they lifted up the boards to see what was in there, and there's this big hole all ready for the coffin to go in and everything else, and these 2 kids were wanting to go and watch the man in the bucket go down the hole. Some of the funny things that we used to get up to as kids, but that was my brother and my cousin, and like I said, they're only like about 3 or 4 months apart in age, and yeah, they were thick as thieves, and they just wanted to go put the man in the bucket down the hole. And all my parents could think, and my mother and my aunt could just think of the horror of what had happened if they had slipped and fallen in and the board had come back over top of them. Fortunately, that didn't happen, and it all turned out good. But anyway, so yeah, I love cemetery, and even afterwards I went for a drive around, and because for some reason I just like driving through Brad's cemetery, the cemetery where he is, but I always leave there feeling at peace, which is nice. Anyway, that's it from me for today. Have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we will catch you guys tomorrow. Who knows what we're going to talk about tomorrow, because I have no idea. Heck on out.